Today we're telling the story of Magic the Gathering in 2022 with the help of one card from each month. January, the Meat Hook Massacre from Innistrad Double Feature. We kick off 2022 with one of the biggest flops of not just the year, but probably the past decade, which is Innistrad Double Feature. When the product was announced, players got the impression that Double Feature was going to be a curated selection of cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt and Innistrad Crimson Vow, with new horror-themed art in a brand new draft format, and players were actually kinda hyped for it. But then once the product released, it became clear that none of this was actually true. In reality, Double Feature was every card from Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt, with the exact same art except run through some sort of grayscale Photoshop filter, considering that the product was selling for literally double the price of a regular booster box, which is ironically the only part of the product that lived up to the Double Feature name. The community mostly ignored the product, and today it's considered to be one of the worst products that Wizards has ever made. February, Fable of the Mirror Breaker from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. While Double Feature was an inauspicious start to the year, things quickly recovered with Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which is widely considered to be the set of the year and one of the best in the past decade. Players had been asking for a return to Kamigawa for many years, but Wizards was hesitant because the original Kamigawa was a pretty divisive set. Some players loved the flavor, but the power level was super low, which turned other players off. But once Neon Dynasty released, it was a massive hit almost immediately. Somehow, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty managed to bring back many of the most beloved aspects of OG Kamigawa, ninjas and samurai and spirit dragons, while also feeling fresh and new with mechanics like reconfigure and sagas that flipped into creatures like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. While Fable itself might have shot a bit high on power level, overall the set was just about perfect. It managed to make an impact across formats thanks to things like the channel lands, but also didn't break anything, which further reinforced the idea that Kamigawa Neon Dynasty should go down as one of the greatest sets of all time. Need some Kamigawa cards of your own? Well, you can snag them from our awesome sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. March, Molten Impact from Kamigawa Alchemy. Just before the end of 2021, Wizards announced the Alchemy format on Magic Arena as a digital-only standard replacement. While the initial response was mixed, players quickly soured on the format, and by the time Kamigawa Alchemy released, most content creators and many players just straight up refused to play Alchemy. The problem with Alchemy is threefold. First, it makes playing Magic Arena even more expensive, and Kamigawa Alchemy highlighted this issue. The set contains 30 cards, but 25 of those are either rare or mythics, which forces players to spend high-value wild cards to get the cards they need to play the format. Second, Wizards decided to make the digital-only Alchemy cards legal in Magic Arena's most popular Eternal format, Historic, which turned off some longtime Historic players. Finally, because the idea of Alchemy is that the cards in the format only exist on Magic Arena, Wizards can rebalance cards at any time. While this might sound like a good idea on paper, in practice, this has led to some really problematic cards and mechanics. For the past year, Alchemy's pattern has been that a new Alchemy set releases, and some of the digital-only cards enable some weird combo that breaks the format and could never exist in paper Magic. The deck dominates the formats for a few weeks until Wizards nerfs it with rebalancings, and then a few weeks later, another Alchemy set releases, and the process repeats itself. Today, Alchemy is disliked by a large portion of Magic Arena players, but Wizards continues to double down on the format by doing things like switching the new player experience on Arena to Alchemy, or having the deck building screen default to the format. Play data suggests that, discounting the games that new players are forced to play, very few franchise players actually play Alchemy. It'll be interesting to see where the format ends up a year from now. Will its unpopularity finally cause Wizards to pull the plug on the format, or will they find a way to win players over? Hint to Wizards, if you're going to try to win people over, start by removing Alchemy cards from Historic, and then reduce the cost of getting Alchemy cards, but at this point, only time will tell for sure. April, Goldspan Dragon from the 2022 Challenger decks. April was supposed to bring with it the launch of the latest unset Infinity, although supply chain issues ended up pushing back the release until the fall. So outside of some secret layer drops, the only Magic product that actually released in April was the 2022 Challenger decks. The idea of Challenger decks is to give standard players a competitive-ish deck right out of the box so they can play it like an F&M level event. And while the 2022 Alchemy New Edition was solid enough, featuring some expensive and playable cards like Goldspan Dragon, Den of the Bugbear, Luminarch Aspirant, and Shipwreck Marsh. The decks also have one huge problem, which is very few people actually play Paper Standard anymore, which is something Wizards themselves have brought up in the past year. A few years ago, Challenger decks were a great way to get players to enter the Standard format, but in today's world, without a robust, organized play system, most Standard play happens on Magic Arena, and Paper play is focused on casual Commander or older formats like Pioneer and Modern, which makes Challenger decks much less useful and exciting than they were in the past. May Ledger Shredder from Streets of New Capenna. The second big Standard set of 2022, Streets of New Capenna is more liked than beloved, especially compared to the GOAT status of February's Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. While this set did offer the rest of the Triumphs, albeit misnamed, the completion of the popular land cycle that started in Ikoria a few years ago, and Ledger Shredder will go down as one of the biggest spoiler season misses of all time, with the card generally being ignored and costing like 50 cents, only to end up as staple in formats all the way back to Modern and shooting up to $20. The set was billed as a urban gangster set, but in the end, the lack of a police force to fight against the bad guys kind of left the set without very much tension. Rather than being a gritty noir style set, it felt like a bunch of not that scary gangsters partying a bit too much. All in all, my most lasting memory from the set is going to be Halo, the drug, well, not drug that Wizards hilariously tried to pretend wasn't actually a drug. Instead, according to Wizards, Halo is just a magical substance that rules the criminal underworld. It's sought after by all for its magic enhancing qualities and comes in many forms like crystals, liquids, and vapors. Definitely not a drug though. They even went as far as suggesting that local game stores use crystals or candy rocks to decorate their stores for the Streets of New Capenna pre-release with Halo, but in the same message they forbid local game stores from using martini glasses, even though there are a bunch of cards in the set that featured those style of glasses, because Magic is for all ages. It was just really weird. June, Reflecting Pool from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. The first Commander Legends is widely considered to be a great set. While it did have some cards that were a bit too overpowered, like Hull Breacher for example, it also had a bunch of really expensive reprints that players wanted and a ton of exciting new cards, with many based on classic Magic characters. As such, when Wizards announced Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate, players were super hyped. Sure, it would be based on D&D lore rather than Magic lore, but the prospect of good reprints and spicy new cards in a normally priced set was pretty appealing. Then spoiler season started, and players quickly learned that, outside of the name, the set really didn't share many similarities to the original Commander Legends. Instead, it was basically Adventures in the Forgotten Realm Part 2, but focused on Commander. The biggest issue with the set is it lacked good reprints. In fact, the most expensive reprint in the set currently is Reflecting Pool at $7. Compare this to the first Commander Legends, which had Vampiric Tutor and Mana Drain and Scroll Rack and a bunch of other expensive cards, and players were rightly disappointed in the set. But somehow, Wizards managed to make it even worse. July, Dockside Extortionist from Double Masters 2022. In what became a trend in 2022, the very week that Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate released, Wizards started spoilers for the next set, Double Masters 2022, and it was quickly revealed that many of the expensive Commander-focused reprints that players expected in Baldur's Gate would instead be in Double Masters 2022, like Dockside Extortionist. The problem is, Double Masters 2022 boxes cost almost 4 times as much as Baldur's Gate boxes, which made players pretty unhappy. While Double Masters 2022 did reprint a lot of important cards, which helped drop their prices for staples like Mana Drain and Dockside and Phyrexian Altar and some Eldrazi, the fact that Wizards has just released a set called Commander Legends, but put all the important Commander reprints in the much more expensive Double Masters 2022 rubbed a lot of the community the wrong way and reinforced the idea that Wizards was greedy and cared more about their bottom line than for players, and that's a perception that would continue to haunt Wizards for the rest of the year. August, Supply Llama from Secret Lair Fortnite. Perhaps the most memed on release of 2022 came in August with the Fortnite Secret Lair drop. Universes Beyond, the series that brings other IPs into Magic, has been controversial since it was first announced with The Walking Dead a couple of years ago, and while some of these releases have actually went over really well, like see the Warhammer 40k Commander decks, which were actually supposed to release in August but got pushed back because of supply issues, others, like the Fortnite Fortnite drop have mostly been mocked by the community, which I actually find a bit hypocritical. Being against Universes Beyond as a whole is one thing. Not wanting other IPs in Magic because of lore or flavor or just personal preference is a perfectly reasonable opinion. On the other hand, one of the weird trends of this year is the community picking and choosing which Universes Beyond products are acceptable and which aren't based on how much they like the IP. Fortnite was super mocked because Fortnite isn't really popular in the Magic community, while other similar crossovers like Transformers or Street Fighter, even Warhammer 40k, have been generally loved because Magic players are fans of or feel nostalgic about those properties. At this point, it's clear Universes Beyond is gonna continue. Both Wizards and Hasbro have cited the series as being hugely successful and a big part of their plans moving forward. So love it or hate it, we're gonna have to get used to seeing cards like Supply Llama show up in our games on occasion. September, the Tabernacle of Pendrelvale, Dominaria United. After the innovative but hit-or-miss gangster theme of Streets of New Capenna, the third standard set of the year, Dominaria United, went the other direction, being steeped in Magic lore, bringing back many super old and beloved characters like Braids and Rith and Giant Karn, while also giving some important characters from Magic's past like Gix and Ashnod their own card for the first time. Apart from Shielder of the Apocalypse dominating standard, perhaps the most interesting aspect of the set is Wizards inserting cards from original Legends printed 30 years ago into collector's boosters, which made it possible to open a $5,000 card like the Tabernacle at Pendrelvale in a brand new booster pack. But the promotion wasn't without some controversy. Most of the valuable cards in Legends are on the reserve list, which means Wizards can't reprint them. So how did reserve list cards end up in Dominaria United packs? Well, the story goes that Wizards just happened to stumble upon some cases of Legends in a warehouse, which they then opened and inserted into packs, which meant that these cards were existing copies rather than reprints, which allowed Wizards to dodge the reserve list issue. But some people were skeptical. Who forgets cases of $60,000 booster boxes in a warehouse? Are there really just tens of millions of dollars of old unopened boxes floating around in the wilds of rural Washington? Whether the boxes were truly lost and then found, or Wizards just stuck them away for a rainy day, remains to be seen. But after players started opening Legends cards in their Dominaria United boosters, it became clear that these were actual real authentic Legends cards and not modern reserve list breaking reproductions. October, Comet Stellar Pup from Infinity. Speaking of controversial products, in October, the latest unset, Infinity, finally released after being pushed from its original April Fool's release date. Wizards has been printing silver-bordered, not tournament legal joke sets for 2 decades now without problems. Some players love the jokes and everyone else can just ignore them because the cards, they just aren't actually real. They're not legal to play anywhere. But this changed with Infinity, with Wizards dropping the iconic silver border, which signified that cards aren't legal to play in any format, and replacing it with a super tiny, much less obvious Acorn hologram. At the same time, they also decided that many of the cards from Infinity would be legal for tournament play, so an Infinity pack would contain some real cards and some fake cards, and the only way to know which was to examine the tiny hologram and see if it was an acorn shape, and this became even more complicated once players realized that some cards were printed with the wrong hologram due to quality control issues. Along with general confusion, Infinity also led to a big debate over what counts as a quote real Magic card, which came to a climax with head Magic designer Mike Rosewater writing a blog post telling players that they shouldn't say cards aren't real because it's gatekeeping and exclusionary, and he said this in defense of Infinity and also Universes Beyond. But this post kinda backfired because the community took it as an official endorsement of proxies, but more on this in a minute. November, Black Lotus from 30th Anniversary Edition. Speaking of proxies, by far the most controversial set released this year was 30th Anniversary Edition. The set's a card-for-card reprint of one of Magic's first ever sets, Beta, well, minus a handful of cards that Wizards didn't feel comfortable reprinting in 2022, except with a unique backside, which makes the cards illegal for tournament play. When Wizards first announced the set, players were kind of excited. Real or not, the product would technically reprint some super expensive and desirable cards like the Power 9 and original Dual Lands. Sure, you wouldn't be able to play them in a tournament, but they'd be perfect for a casual Commander game. And then Wizards announced the price. 30th Anniversary Edition would cost a $1,000 for 4 randomized booster packs. This quickly turned 30th Anniversary Edition into the most hated Magic product maybe of all time, and it did something that almost never happens. It united warring factions of the Magic community. In general, Magic players and Magic investors don't really get along. Players want their cards to be cheap so they can play with them. Investors want their cards to be expensive so they can profit from them. But amazingly, 30th Anniversary Edition managed to make both groups hate it, but for very different reasons. Players were against the set because of its absurd price point, which led to a movement that continues to this day of players posting images of the card Greed in response to any of Wizards' tweets or in their Twitch chat, while collectors were against the set because they saw as Wizards breaking the reserve list and reprinting cards that they promised not to reprint, which could potentially hurt the value of the original versions of the cards, which they probably owned. The end result was that essentially the entire Magic community promised to boycott the set. The set was so disliked by the Magic community that Wizards tried to get influencers from other games to promote the product, but most of them turned Wizards down, and some of those who actually did make videos about the product ended up deleting them and apologizing, and then Bank of America jumped in on the action and double downgraded Hasbro's stock. Still, despite all this, most people assumed that 30th Anniversary Edition would quickly sell out. But when the set finally dropped, it became clear that the boycott actually worked and the community had won its battle against the billion-dollar company. After less than 40 minutes, Wizards pulled the product and issued an oddly worded tweet that implied that the set didn't actually sell out, which was more or less confirmed later by Hasbro CEO Chris Cox, who said that the company had reduced the number it released based on feedback from the community. The best info we have suggests that Wizards intended to sell around 14,000 copies of 30th Anniversary Edition, but only managed to sell just over 2,000, or 15% of their goal. December, Balin Wandering Knight from Jumpstart 2022. Let's close out the year on a high note. One of the best things that Wizards has done in the past few years is to embrace unique art styles. We see this on various showcase cards, secret lair drops like Just Add Milk, and more. In Jumpstart 2022, Wizards decided to reprint a bunch of cards with anime art. For example, Balin Wandering Knight is a cat girl, and these cards have been a huge hit. The original Balin from Commander 2017 is worth around $5. The anime version is over $40, and the same is true for a bunch of other anime art cards from the set, like Cold Steel Heart, Mirror Image, and Stitcher Supplier. Reprinting old cards with a unique art style that players enjoy is one of the best and most player-friendly ways that Wizards can monetize the game. If you just want any Balin to lead your Commander deck, you can snag the $5 version. If you're a huge weeb and got some extra cash, you can snag the expensive anime printing. As we head into 2023, hopefully we see more of this style of monetization from Wizards and less 30th Anniversary style cash grabs. So that is 2022 in Magic the Gathering, is told by one card per month. What's your favorite part of the year? What's your least favorite? What are you hoping for in 2023? Let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for even more Magic, make sure to check out my video about the best creature during every year in Magic, or maybe the one about the most impactful set that doesn't technically exist, Spectral Chaos.